Hello everyone, my name is Jingyi from the Institute of Communications Research at University of Illinois, and today my presentation is about regulating the Chinese live streaming mania, a mediation between the national and the market. Live streaming platform has been one of the most popular and phenomenal social media in China in the past 5 years, with many people becoming professional live streamers and even more people including watching live streaming in their daily routines. These platforms' popularity is due to their encompassment of the entertainment function, with live streamers providing various types of content and social network function for users to interact with each other in a synchronous setting. The booming of live streaming platforms is built upon the popularization of mobile devices among Chinese people and the spread out of telecommunication infrastructures. The value of the whole industry was estimated to achieve $5 billion at the end of 2017. Large-scale internal migration, known as the floating population, in China has brought workforces into cities, yet also require these immigrants to navigate the urban environment by themselves. And this population constitutes the major users of live streaming platforms and services. By the end of 2017, the total number of users of live streaming services in China is 350 million, while there are also 3.5 million professional and semi-professional live streamers across over 100 platforms. Even though many platforms initially claimed that every ordinary people can just sign up as live streamers so they can share bits of their lives with other people, the vast amount of cash flowed across the platform has eventually made live streaming into almost full-time profession, with other industries emerging around making live streamers into online celebrities. These companies handle a complete business circle, including recruiting talents, providing them with spaces for doing live streaming, developing training for broadcasters to be able to better communicate with their followers, and setting them up with brand endorsement or product promotion opportunities. The majority of the revenue of this industry and its derived industries is driven by the trade of virtual gifts within the live streaming platforms. Although getting entertained by the live streaming content or even interacting with live streamers is free for the users, it is exactly because of this business and operation model, users are habituated to equate the level of connection they can achieve with the money they would spend on purchasing virtual gifts for live streamers they follow. The model of regulation that the Chinese Party state relies on the distribution of liability and responsibility following a hierarchical structure, from platforms and organizations to ordinary users. Even though there is common acknowledgement on the existence of the prevailing media censorship in China, after the founding of People's Republic of China, there has not been a specific law being made to formalize the legal liabilities of media and other publisher of information. The only legal document addresses this issue is the Chinese Constitution, with its Article 35 granting Chinese citizens rights to freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, of procession, and of demonstration. Most media regulations are released in the form of notice or regulation, therefore only exercising administrative power but not legal power. Yet the Chinese government does have a zero-tolerance policy towards pornographic and other sexual content, as according to the Article 24 of the Constitution, that assure the state's mission of strengthening the building of socialist morality. Therefore, the creation and dissemination of any pornographic and sexual content over any channels and platforms are deemed as illegal according to the Chinese criminal law, which identifies obscenity as publications, films, video, and audio recordings and images containing depictions of sexual acts. The criminal law also excludes sex-related content in the realms of physiology and medicine or as artistic expression from the scope of obscenity. However, besides the writing on obscenity available in legal codes, what are considered as pornography and obscenity have always been ill-defined, especially when it comes to the practical level. Legal scholars have been arguing that the difficulties is operating under these particular legal codes are also due to the moral and ethical groundings of these laws are reflecting the social views on sex almost following the asceticism or abstinence standard. For traditional media platforms and content creators, The regulatory system comes into effect from issuing official licenses for participating media content production and publishing and broadcasting to the public. Enacting the licensing process enables the state to keep track of who are creating media content and what content are being generated and disseminated across different platforms. Individuals who work for these media platforms are entitled the right to represent their organizations when they are creating media content, but they also need to be aware of and undertake legal liabilities and accountabilities as employees of such media organizations. Within these officialized media organizations, there are also specific departments being created to overlook and monitor the content internally before they can be released to the public readers, listeners, or audiences. The emergence and burgeoning of social media provided Chinese citizens with possibilities to make their own opinions and expressions being heard by a bigger group of audience through seemingly opener and freer platforms. These platforms, similar to traditional media outlets, are binded to officially registered with the state as a licensed creator and publisher of public information and content. At the same time, the regulatory system on these platforms adds another layer to itself in response to this new form of media in which common people are becoming both the producers and the consumers of content. The party state eventually requires these new media platforms to take on more responsibilities in both preventing sensitive content from being created and disseminated through filtering based on IP address, locations, as well as specific keywords, and deleting with the least delay possible after it has already been sent out to minimize the negative impacts in the society. When live streaming platforms first became popular, because the regulation and censorship system was not able to catch up with their real-time feature, they offered a gray area in which some controversial content, such as the erotic or pornographic ones, can still get created and broadcasted out. Live streamers do not always need to show their body parts to satisfy the needs for erotic or pornographic content creation. More often, they would perform certain actions that can be interpreted as having sexual implications, such as making moaning sounds, touching themselves, or eating things in an arousing way. The convenience that live streaming platforms provide for content creators who would risk themselves over being penalized as promoting obscenity to public did not last long because these platforms were able to reach hundreds of millions of active users, among which a large amount specifically use live streaming platforms for accessing erotic and pornographic content. Regarding the huge impact that such content had on endangering the socialist morality, the state requiring the platforms to take on more initiatives in cracking down the contagion of erotic and pornographic content across live streaming platforms. One of the initial attempts that happened is the Sanitizing the Internet 2016 action carried out by the Publicity Department of the Communist Party of China, targeting at illegal online publishers and publications that contains obscene and pornographic content. This action tries to delegate more responsibility for censoring and regulating the content to industries and companies themselves. The action resulted in the formalization of the industry's self-regulation, with the live streaming industry releasing industrial conventions that enforces real name registration of live streamers, banning female live streamers from dressing in cami tops and other overly exposing or tight outfits as a specific acts, which is erotically eating banana because of banana's phallic resemblance. The platform that hosts such type of performances will be facing administrative charges, including getting their broadcasting license being suspended, fines, and etc. Live streamers who violate such rules would need to face the deletion of their accounts on platforms as the initial penalization. In August of 2018, the Chinese authorities officially announced that they will strengthen the regulation of live streaming services as a joint effort between multiple government agencies, including the National Office Against Pornographic and Illegal Publications, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, the State Administration of Radio and Television, and the State Internet Information Office. A notice was released as the regulatory guidance for the live streaming industry. According to this notice, live streaming platforms need to file for becoming the official internet content provider, which is a specific type of media licensing, gain certificates for news services, online shows and live streamings, and report to local police within 30 days after a show is broadcasted. This regulatory action also requires the platforms to implement real name registration of both live streamers and viewers and work on developing a more up-to-date and complete blacklist of live streamers who violate the regulation by providing content that can be considered as pornographic. After the release of this notice, another case of live streamers getting detention not only because of performing pornographic or erotic content happens. In October 2018, Shanghai police detained and punished one of the most followed live streamers on Huya live streaming platform after she was reported to singing the Chinese national anthem in an unrespectful way. The police sentenced her with 5 days of administrative detention. The offending segment broadcasted to some of her 2 million followers on the Huya app lasted barely 10 seconds. It was alleged to be violating China's new national anthem law that was released in 2017, which prohibits playing or singing the national anthem in a distorted or disrespectful way in public. In early 2019, the state further strengthened the regulation by requiring censoring both live streaming content and real-time comments made by users at the backstage of the platform before they get broadcasted out. Live streaming platforms, because of its functionalities including providing publicly accessible entertainment and forming online communities of live streamers and their viewers, can be considered as a venue where public culture forms and develops. But the content of live streaming can be categorized as private and personal, constructing the illusion of having the communication between the live streamer and the user situated in a private setting is also among most platforms' major endeavors. Live streaming platforms intrinsically problematize the distinction between the public and the private, and becomes a dispositif of neoliberal governmentality. From the standpoint of the government of self, the design of live streaming platforms establishes a competition for attention that tends to favor the neoliberal culture of performance. In terms of structure of these platforms that focuses on interactivity and fostering virtual connectivity, the way in which users intertwine their connections is paralleled by the neoliberal paradigm of spontaneous market order. As the live streamers see more viewers joining the live streaming session and more virtual gifts flowing in when they flip their dress or showing their nipple, they're more willing to take on that risk. Furthermore, the collection and usage of personal information on these users, encompassing all their activities within the platforms, in order to inform the design of the algorithm and interface to attract more users, and also reflects the neoliberal logic of following the economic incentives in different public and private realms. It is also upon these platforms Chinese subjects negotiate with the interplay between the technologies of power, exemplified by state regulation and surveillance, upon these platforms, especially in the Chinese context, and the technologies of the self, leading to a neoliberal goal of self-care, to construct their social and moral subjectivity. Within the process of forming their subjectivities through mediated environments such as the live streaming platforms, they try to fulfill their desire, which is a wide range of material, emotional, and affective desires, yet need to be deemed as appropriate under the governing power. The reformation of its economic structure from a collective and planned model into a market-based model has incorporated China into the globalized neoliberal project. This project is a form of governmentality that encompasses all aspects of life, from civic engagement and political participation to developing personal relationships and fulfilling physical and emotional needs. In the case of China, when an economy driven by market rationalities encounters the aftermath of a socialist political experiment, Chinese citizens had to self-navigate the complex trade-off between personal interests and national interests. The socialist revolution constructed under a communist ideology first struck the Confucianism-rooted moral order, yet the successors of the CCP after Mao then attempt to develop a Western-oriented neoliberal agenda to settle internal upheavals while also enable China to re-enter the New World Order. However, the party state sometimes find the consequences of its economic incentives in conflict with the socialist moral standards it constructed for its citizens as the code of conduct. Chinese sociologist Li Yinghe also stated that contemporary China can be characterized by a rift between its capitalist utopia visions and its ancient obscenity law. The obscenity law is outdated and impossible to keep up with Chinese citizens' desire for exploring various forms of freedom that is enabled by reformed economic status. Katrin Jacobs also regards the Chinese government's war on pornography as a flawed governmental incentives against the general public, or a shield used by the official to step up the general surveillance. Facing the challenges posed by new media technologies such as live streaming platforms, the Chinese government, on one hand, needs to guarantee the economic advantages that it can benefit from the emergence and development of such industry, but on the other hand, wants to secure its authoritative model over controlling information and ideology. The availability of such platforms also stimulate and facilitate Chinese people's needs for expressing themselves and establishing connections in the age of floating. From the technical and practical standpoint, it will be almost impossible for the state to execute a centralized and effective regulating system over live streaming platforms using public resources and infrastructures. Thus, the government has to delegate such responsibilities to industries and individuals whose legal liabilities and responsibilities under the current law enforcement scope cannot be fully tracked. These companies and individuals may even willing to risk the administrative penalizations following economic motives. Therefore, the attempts to regulate live streaming platforms exemplifies the intrinsic dilemmas within the current Chinese political regime that is a hybrid of authoritarianism and neoliberalism.